At precisely 9:47 a.m., under the cold stare of a motion-activated chandelier and the hush of a marble-floored lounge, a woman walked in unnoticed. She didn't announce herself. She didn't dress for war. But make no mistake, war noticed her. Her name was not yet spoken, but her presence whispered disruption. She wasn't in heels. She wore no designer bag to validate her. Just a slate-gray cardigan, low heels, and eyes that had seen boardrooms burn and rebuild. She looked ordinary, deliberately so. And in a world trained to serve image over substance, that made her invisible. Or worse, dismissible. The moment she requested a $3 million withdrawal, the atmosphere fractured. The silence wasn't neutral, it was loaded. Loaded with assumptions. Loaded with fear masked as policy. Loaded with the smug cruelty of power that believed itself safe behind marble counters and client protocol. She was black. She was quiet. And she wasn't playing the part they expected. One woman, one decision would unravel an entire branch. But not with shouting, not with cameras, not with threats. With silence. And then, with truth. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something. Have you ever been mistaken for someone who didn't belong in a place you built with your own hands? Have you ever watched a room decide your worth before you even said your name? If this story feels like yours or your mother's, or your brother's, then don't just watch it. Stand with it. Subscribe. Share this video with someone who still thinks racism is always loud. Because what you're about to witness is not just a black CEO denied service. It's a system exposed. It's power undercover. It's what happens when truth walks into a room full of assumption and doesn't blink. We begin not with shouting, but with the sound of a soft chair cushion, pressing down beneath the weight of composure. Celeste Monroe has just taken her seat. What she's about to do in the next 10 minutes will change this bank forever. The double doors of Liongate Private Wealth clicked behind her with the hush of moneyed silence, the kind of silence that judged first and asked questions never. Celeste Monroe paused just inside the threshold. No greeting, no offer of help, not even a glance from the receptionist, whose French-tipped fingers danced over a keyboard with more urgency than the presence of a client. She took in the room's sleek leather chairs, soft jazz, the gleam of frosted glass, and a fragrance that reeked of eucalyptus and exclusion. Every inch of the space whispered exclusivity, but it spoke in a dialect that did not include her skin. She wore a charcoal gray cardigan, slate slacks, and flats. Her locks were tied neatly at the nape of her neck. No badge, no entourage, no designer tag to announce power, just presence. Intentional, undercover. She stepped toward the counter and said calmly, "I'd like to initiate a $3 million withdrawal from my liquid account." The air shifted. The receptionist looked up, slowly, her smile forced and thin. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I'm here for a transaction, not a consultation." The woman blinked. "Let me check with the branch manager." From the far side of the glass wall, a blonde head lifted. Karen Elridge, branch manager. Her stilettos clicked like accusations as she walked forward. She didn't smile. Her eyes scanned Celeste top to bottom. Then she said it soft but sharp. "Unless you're here to clean the floor, you need to leave." Celeste didn't flinch. She simply looked at the woman and said, "Bring me your highest-ranking employee, quietly." And then she sat down. Just like that, the storm began. Karen didn't move at first. Her jaw tensed, that tiny flicker of disbelief women like Celeste knew all too well. A black woman asking for millions without flashing a brand, badge, or apology. That wasn't just unexpected. It was offensive. "I'm the branch manager," Karen finally said, stepping closer, her perfume citrusy, sharp, and uninviting. "Any large transaction of that size requires verification, ID, source of funds, and proof of legitimate purpose." Celeste turned her head slightly. "The funds are housed in account 198X-LUX under Monroe Holdings. Purpose portfolio shift, internal capital. The ID will match, as will the balance." Karen smirked. Anyone can memorize numbers. Behind her, another employee appeared younger, tighter smile, ponytail too tight. Stephanie. She whispered something in Karen's ear, eyes darting toward Celeste like she was radioactive. Karen leaned back slightly, folding her arms. We've had issues lately. Scams. Walk-ins claiming wealth. You understand. Celeste looked directly at her. I do. What I don't understand is why you're speaking as if I'm one of them before even checking. Stephanie added, We reserve the lounge for verified clients. She doesn't look. She trailed off, but the sentence was already finished. Celeste let the silence breathe stretch bruise. Then, calm and measured. Is there a dress code for liquidity? Karen stiffened. Celeste gently placed her tablet case on the table. You haven't asked for my name. Not once. You've only looked. Karen's voice dropped. And what should I call you? Celeste leaned back, her tone level, her eyes unreadable. Ms. Monroe. But titles don't matter. Behavior does. The room quieted, but tension pulsed beneath every breath. The storm wasn't loud. Not yet. It was listening. A leather chair creaked. Someone shifted. No one spoke. From the far corner, a man in a crisp navy suit, older, white, heavy-set, cleared his throat like an announcement. He adjusted his cufflink with performative grace and walked past Celeste's table. With a flick of his wrist, he knocked her tablet onto the marble floor. It hit with a dull thud, followed by a silence more violent than noise. Careful, he said, not looking back. That kind of money attracts the wrong crowd. Stephanie stifled a laugh. Karen didn't blink. Celeste slowly leaned down, retrieved the tablet, and placed it back onto the table precisely, without anger. You didn't apologize, she said softly. The man turned, smug. For what? It's not my fault they let anyone sit in here now. Karen interjected, fake calm. Mr. Langston is one of our platinum-tier clients. Let's not escalate. Celeste nodded once. Of course. Then, eyes still on Karen, she said, let's not escalate. Not yet. Another staff member, a junior associate with anxious posture, hovered near the entrance. She whispered something to Stephanie, who nodded and muttered securities on standby. Celeste heard it. Everyone did. But no one expected her response. She smiled. Not warm, not polite. The kind of smile forged in depositions, boardrooms, and courtrooms where silence has the final word. Then, calmly, she reached into her blazer pocket and pressed a small, flat button on a wireless mic pinned under her collar. A light blinked once. Recording started. No threats, no shouting, just evidence. And Celeste Monroe, black and unbothered, said to no one in particular, Let's continue. The storm had no thunder yet, but the marble had already started to crack. Stephanie West leaned against the counter like she owned it, arms crossed, blazer too stiff, authority borrowed. She came in here off the street, she whispered to Karen, though loud enough for the lounge to hear. No appointment, no validation, and dressed like, what, a substitute teacher. Karen didn't smile, but her silence agreed. Just then, the man who'd knocked over Celeste's tablet, Langston, returned with a coffee in hand. He took a deliberate sip, watching Celeste as if she were a spectacle. You folks love playing rich, he said, voice dripping with performance, but money has posture, and I don't see it. A chuckle slipped from a seated client nearby. Celeste said nothing. She only shifted her gaze to the espresso machine in the corner, watching it hiss and whir, as if the appliances, at least, knew how to behave under pressure. Then another voice cut through, younger, sharp-edged. She probably hacked someone's login, muttered a banker trainee near the hallway. That's been happening lately, people dressed down, trying to pass off as legit. Someone snorted. Another nodded. Celeste's breathing stayed even. But inside, she could feel it, that familiar itch beneath the skin. The kind black professionals learn to master. That calculus of, do I speak, or do I win? Stephanie stepped closer. voice tinged with the practiced concern of false protocol. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you have any documentation to prove you're even a client?" Celeste lifted her eyes, slow and deliberate. "I do," she said. "But I'm more interested in what you're proving by how you ask." Karen folded her arms. "We're not required to serve walk-ins over 200,000 without verification. You know that, don't you?" Celeste tilted her head. "I know the law. I helped write the compliance framework for private withdrawals in this state." Karen blinked just once, but it was a crack. Celeste continued, voice smooth. "If you'd like, I can quote the subsection about how bias cloaked as protocol can still be prosecutable." Stephanie exhaled sharply. "We're just doing our job, Ms." She paused, waiting for a name. Celeste didn't give one, not yet. Instead, a quiet voice rose from a nearby chair. A young man, mid-30s, laptop open, watching the scene over his glasses. "Doesn't seem like standard procedure," he said, almost to himself. "Feels heavier." Karen snapped toward him. "Can I help you, sir?" He smiled politely, just observing. "I used to work compliance at Barclays. We were trained to hear tone before trouble." The room cooled. Celeste met his eyes just briefly and nodded once, a silent alliance. Then, without breaking gaze, she said to Karen, "This isn't about policy. This is about comfort." Karen scoffed. "Excuse me." "You're uncomfortable with how I look," Celeste said, "and you're mistaking that for professional intuition." Stephanie interjected, "Ma'am, if you really have money here, prove it." Celeste leaned forward slightly. Her voice didn't rise, but sharpened. "Why should I prove I belong in a place I partially own?" No one answered. Not because they couldn't, but because, in that moment, they realized she might be telling the truth. A whisper rippled through the lounge, the kind that wears suits in shame. Celeste didn't move. Across the room, the older man with the Barclays background, now clearly intrigued, closed his laptop. He glanced toward a woman sitting next to him, middle-aged, pearl earrings, scanning Celeste like a misplaced file. "She said she owns part of the bank," the woman whispered. He nodded, or knows enough to bluff like hell. That's when the room shifted. From near the espresso bar, a silver-haired man stood lean frame, cane in hand, voice low but deliberate. "I've been a client here for 16 years, he said. All eyes turned. He adjusted his cufflinks, speaking with the slow authority of someone used to being heard. "I've never once been asked to verify my account when I walked in." Karen stiffened. He turned to her directly. "I've worn jeans. I've brought my grandson in Crocs. Never a problem." Karen tried to interrupt, but he held up a finger. "But I watched you ask this woman to explain herself before you even asked her name." Stephanie interjected. "That's not—" "Don't finish that sentence," the man said, calm but final. "You'll regret the sound of it." Celeste nodded to him. Not in gratitude, in acknowledgement. Because even when power shows up late, it still matters. Karen's face burned red. "You don't understand what's happening here." The man looked at her, then at Celeste. "Oh, I do. What you don't understand is who you're talking to." He sat back down, and the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded. The silence stretched taut, trembling, dangerous. Karen turned away, muttering something to Stephanie through clenched teeth. The marble floors gleamed like a stage, and the audience watching, shifting. From the window seat, a young black man in a navy hoodie raised his phone. His thumb hovered over the record button. "Don't," a voice said behind him. He turned. A taller black man, suited in gray, stepped forward, calm, quiet, older. "Don't film," he said. "Not yet." The younger one frowned. "We need to show this." "No," the man replied. "We need to say it. That's how we win." Celeste watched, eyes sharp, still seated, still silent, but her gaze locked on the exchange. Then, from the back row, a voice broke through. Young, feminine, unpolished but strong. "She's not the problem," the woman said. rising slowly. You are... She was maybe 25, hair in twists, backpack at her feet, hands trembling slightly. I've been watching you, she said to Stephanie. You've looked at her the same way they looked at me last month when I asked to cash a check. Stephanie blinked. I don't remember you. You never looked, the woman replied. The room stirred. Celeste turned toward her gently, intentionally. What's your name? She asked. Maya. Celeste nodded. Then speak. Maya. Maya swallowed hard, then raised her chin. She doesn't owe you an explanation. She walked in here quietly, asked for her money, and you treated her like a thief. Karen crossed her arms. We have procedures. Celeste cut in, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. You have patterns, and I'm done watching them repeat. Karen stepped back, arms crossed, lips pressed. We don't have to take this. Maya didn't blink. You already did. You took dignity, then asked for proof of worth. A murmur spread, not loud, just enough to fracture the room. Celeste opened her tablet. Her fingers moved swiftly, almost imperceptibly, as she typed a single phrase into a secure field. Activate Protocol Delta. From hundreds of miles away, a woman in a quiet office, Carla Jensen, Chief of Compliance, saw the alert flash red on her screen. Without a word, she pressed a button. In the lounge, no one noticed the ceiling mics had engaged. No one saw the digital log beginning to record every word, every pause, every racial code dressed up as customer service. Back in the room, Stephanie's voice rose again. Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, we'll have to involve security. Celeste looked up, eyes soft but cold. Security's already here. You just don't know which side they're on yet. A beat passed. Then Craig, the security officer in a pressed Navy uniform, stepped forward. We've had reports of a disturbance. Celeste met his eyes. Her voice didn't tremble. Are you here to remove the noise or the source of it? Craig hesitated. Karen barked. She's refusing verification. Remove her from the client lounge now. Celeste gently set the tablet on the table, then folded her hands. I haven't raised my voice, she said. I haven't broken a law. But every word spoken since I entered this room is now permanently recorded. No one laughed this time. Even Craig took a step back. The storm hadn't landed, but the wind had changed. Craig stood still. The badge on his chest suddenly felt heavier than his uniform. I said remove her, Karen repeated, louder this time, as if volume could erase doubt. He looked at Celeste. She didn't plead. She didn't shift. Her hands remained calmly folded on the table, the posture of someone who'd already won, but was patient enough to wait for everyone else to realize it. From the far side of the room, the older client, the silver-haired man with the cane, rose again. I suggest you don't touch her, he said. Karen whipped around. Excuse me. He pointed with his cane. You're not protecting policy. You're performing fear. A low ripple of agreement passed through the room. A middle-aged Latina woman near the coffee station nodded slowly. I've felt this before. Different bank. Same tone. Karen's face tightened. Celeste looked around the room, then said quietly, People remember how you made them feel. Not your policies. Not your plaques. She turned back to Craig. You want to put your hands on me? You go ahead. But I suggest you check who owns the badge stitched above your heart. Craig blinked, then stepped back. Karen hissed, You're bluffing. Celeste's voice dropped to a whisper. And you're betting your career that I am... A pause. Then, from the back of the room, a quiet voice, hesitant, but clear. She's not bluffing. All eyes turned. It was the young man in the hoodie, the one who almost filmed. His phone now rested on the table. But his voice had just pressed record. In a quiet operations center across the city, Carla Jensen adjusted her headset. Protocol Delta is live, she said, voice steady, voice recognition active. Biometric ID confirmed. Subject Monroe, Celeste. Location Liongate Branch 07. Behind her, a wall of screens lit up with sound waves, each one capturing tone, inflection, intent. Back in the lounge, no one knew their words now had weight. Legal weight. Craig still hadn't moved. Celeste didn't look at him again. She looked at Karen. "You're uncomfortable. That's not illegal." But acting on that discomfort, she said, softly, "Now that's a problem." Karen scoffed. "You're manipulating everyone in this room." Celeste raised an eyebrow. "I haven't even raised my voice." Stephanie stepped forward. "You came in here trying to make a scene. You knew what this would look like." Celeste's reply was calm, dangerous in its stillness. "I knew what it would expose." From the side, the young man in the hoodie Malik stood taller. "You people always think black means broke," he said, "or angry, or fake." Karen snapped, "Watch your tone, sir." He smiled grimly. "That's the problem. We've been watching our tone for decades. Hasn't changed yours." Silence. Then the junior teller, a young black woman in the corner, stepped forward, hesitant. I know who she is," she whispered. Karen spun. "What did you say?" The young woman looked down, then up again. "I recognized her the second she walked in. She signs my paycheck." Karen blinked. And for the first time, she didn't have a single word. Karen's voice cracked. "She signs your no. That's impossible." The junior teller stepped back, shoulders tightening. "I wasn't sure, but her name's on the quarterly bonus memo. I read it twice." Stephanie spun around. "Why didn't you say anything earlier?" The girl whispered, "Because I watched how you treated her before she even said who she was." At that moment, Carla's voice echoed in Celeste's earpiece, quiet but surgical. 5 discrimination-related complaints filed under Karen Elridge's employee code in the last 18 months. 3 marked unverified within 24 hours. 2 flagged by internal audit but never escalated. Celeste didn't flinch, and Stephanie. Carla responded without pause. 7 flagged communications. 1 included the phrase, "Watch for entitled types. They always act like they own the place." Celeste exhaled through her nose. "Of course they do." Karen was unraveling. This is some elaborate trick, some PR stunt. Celeste leaned back, calm as a loaded chamber. "The only thing staged here is your outrage." Craig took 1 step forward, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, you're under observation. You understand that." Celeste looked up at him, eyes steel cold. "Everyone in this room is under observation. That includes you." From the wall near the espresso machine, a soft chime sounded. A panel above the counter blinked, discreet but alive. "Monitoring mode active." Karen's face drained of color. Malik whispered, "This place was never safe." She just turned the lights on. And the room, for the first time, began to feel like a courtroom. From the back row, a voice piped up sharp, smooth, and trying too hard to sound neutral. "I think this has gone far enough." A woman stood, white, mid-40s, crisp blazer, pearl studs, and that strained smile of someone used to sitting on non-profit boards but never next to accountability. "I've been a client here for 12 years, she continued, "and I've never seen staff behave like this. I'm shocked, truly." Karen latched onto the lifeline. "Thank you, Ms. Halberd. We appreciate." "I wasn't finished," the woman interrupted, raising a manicured hand. "I'm not saying Ms." She paused, then forced it. Monroe was treated fairly. Celeste's gaze landed on her, unblinking. "I just think we should de-escalate. Nobody needs to lose their job over a misunderstanding." The silence wasn't grateful. It was surgical. Celeste replied, calm and exact. "You're not defending me. You're defending your record." Ms. Halberd's face twitched. "Excuse me." "You don't want to be quoted as silent in the room where bias bloomed," Celeste said. "So now, belatedly, you bloom into a bystander with timing." No one moved. Even Craig lowered his head slightly. Carla's voice returned in Celeste's ear. "Media alert flagged. Halberd is on the Liongate advisory board. Her donations are public. Celeste's tone didn't change. Of course she is. Then louder for the room. This isn't about defending me. It's about deciding who you are when the cameras aren't rolling. Stephanie swallowed hard. Karen. She just stared at the blinking light above the espresso bar. And for once, she said nothing. Celeste reached into her tablet case. No one flinched, but everyone watched. From the sleek leather pocket, she pulled out a small black folder, thick spine, gold-embossed Seal Lion Gate Holdings, private directive. The kind of document that didn't belong to clients. It belonged to owners. She placed it gently on the table, not with flair, with finality. Karen took a single step back. What is that? She asked, voice brittle. Celeste didn't answer. Instead, she flipped the folder open. Inside notarized documents, stamped letters, a corporate ledger, a board appointment memo signed by 6 executives, and sitting on top a single-page printout ownership stake certification, 82% controlling shareholder. Monroe Holdings. Stephanie choked on a breath. Craig whispered, "Oh, hell." The door to the lounge clicked. 2 uniformed officers entered, one black, one white, calm, neutral, alert. "We received a call about a financial fraud attempt," the lead officer said, glancing around. "Who made the report?" Stephanie opened her mouth, then closed it. Karen stepped forward. "I did. This woman." Celeste didn't look at her. She looked directly at the officer and said, "Before you proceed, you should read page 3 of this folder." The officer took the document, eyebrows tightening as he scanned it. Karen tried to speak again, but he raised a hand. "Ma'am," he said to her, "did you know she owns this bank?" Karen froze. Celeste finally spoke to her. "You made a report. Now make a statement." Karen's lips parted, but no sound followed. The officer looked at her again. "Ma'am, did you knowingly file a report against the primary owner of this institution?" Stephanie stepped back. "We didn't know who she was." Celeste tilted her head. "That's the point." Karen whispered, "I thought she was lying. No one comes in asking for millions dressed like what?" Celeste asked softly. "Like me." The officer raised an eyebrow. From the corner of the room, a voice cracked under pressure. It was Robert, the assistant branch manager, silent until now, mid-50s, eyes tired, tie crooked. "She told us to escalate any withdrawals over $500,000 if the client didn't match our image standards." Karen's head snapped. "You liar." Robert didn't look at her. He looked at the officer. "I signed off on 3 of those reports, but I flagged them for internal review. They were deleted." Stephanie's face drained. "Robert." Celeste didn't blink. "How many of them were black?" Robert swallowed. "All 3. A hush. Then Carla's voice entered Celeste's ear. "Confirmed." Karen manually deleted 6 compliance escalations tied to racial bias within this branch, 3 linked to Stephanie's employee ID. Celeste spoke aloud. "We now have verification of internal manipulation, deletions, pattern denial of service." The officer turned to Karen. "We're going to need to take a statement, a real one, in writing." Karen tried to breathe, but it was Robert who sat down as if the truth had weight. And for the first time, Celeste leaned back. Not in defeat, but in control. Celeste rose slowly. No announcement, no drama. Just gravity shifting. Every chair adjusted. Karen backed a step without realizing it. Celeste's eyes swept the room, not angry, not triumphant, just awake and unwilling to sleep again. "You asked for proof of funds," she said, voice steady. "But what you really wanted was proof I didn't belong." Stephanie opened her mouth. Regret flickered too late to matter. Celeste continued. "You called it protocol, but it was preference. You called it due diligence, but it was doubt." She turned toward the officers. "This isn't about fraud. This is about fragility, theirs, not mine." Malik, near the window, nodded slowly. Say it again. Celeste didn't. She didn't need to. The silence was already saying it for her. Across the lounge, clients began to shift uncomfortably. A young black couple held hands tighter. An elderly white man removed his glasses not to clean them, but to look more clearly. Carla's voice returned in Celeste's ear. Media alert, local business news just picked up the escalation flag. Prepare for visibility. Celeste smiled faintly. Not because she wanted attention, but because attention was finally listening. Karen tried one last line. This was never meant to happen. Celeste turned her gaze on her, cool and quiet. It wasn't meant to. That's why it did. She picked up the folder. And for the first time, the room no longer asked who she was. It wondered how it ever dared to assume. The silence in the room was no longer tense, it was scorched. Celeste laid the folder back on the table, opened to a new page, not her ownership certificate. Something else. A spreadsheet. No colors, no headings, just rows of numbers, letters, and two quiet columns labeled Client Risk, Appearance, and Notes Discretion Flag. Karen stepped forward, her voice barely audible. Where did you get that? Celeste didn't answer. She turned to the officer beside her. This document is a live extract from Liongate's internal CRM, cross-referenced with deleted compliance reports. The officer read silently, then said, 17 names. Celeste nodded. Clients marked as elevated risk, not for activity, but for presence. Karen whispered, That's confidential internal tagging. It's profiling, Celeste said. Stephanie's voice cracked. We were told to flag people who looked likely to escalate. It was for staff safety. Celeste stared at her. People like who? Stephanie blinked. Craig, the security lead, suddenly stepped forward, voice low, shaking. I saw that list, he said, 2 months ago. Natalie sent it out, said we needed to minimize exposure risk. She called it a burn list. Karen turned, Craig. He ignored her. I was told if a client walks in and doesn't fit premium optics, slow down the process, redirect them to general services. Celeste's voice dropped, sharp as a blade drawn slow. How many of them never made it past this lobby? Craig didn't answer. He didn't have to. The room already knew. The spreadsheet glowed cold on the table, its rows indifferent. Black, Latino, mixed race, all marked unverified after first contact. Celeste tapped the screen once. Column J notes inconsistent tone, likely to contest policy. The officer leaned in. These are just feelings. Someone made this list based on instinct. Craig, still standing near the edge of the conversation, whispered, Not instinct. Instructions. Karen shook her head violently. We don't make decisions like that. Celeste didn't look at her. She turned toward the junior teller, the one who had stayed silent until now. The young woman swallowed hard. We were told to watch for posture mismatch. If someone didn't look like they banked here, we were to route them to standard service, quietly. And did you, Celeste asked? The girl nodded. At first, then I stopped. Why? Because one of the people I redirected cried outside. The room exhaled like it had held its breath for months. Stephanie, hands trembling now, blurted out, I didn't invent this. I was trained into it. If I didn't adjust client flags, Karen said I'd be seen as inattentive to risk. Celeste turned to her, voice calm but cutting. You weren't just silent, you were strategic. Stephanie tried to speak, but there was nothing left to say. The spreadsheet didn't blink. It just sat there, truth formatted in rows, guilt wrapped in code. And Celeste, she simply closed the file. Some truths didn't need to stay open. They just needed to be exposed. A voice rose from near the frosted divider, soft, hesitant. I have something. Everyone turned. It was a young black woman in a denim jacket, seated alone since the beginning. No one had noticed her until now. That was the point. She stood, phone in hand, knuckles pale, My name is Zora. 2 weeks ago, I came in to open a business account. I'm a freelance photographer. They said I didn't qualify due to inconsistent financial history. Karen scoffed. That's policy? Zora didn't flinch. I had all my documentation, W-9s, contracts, deposits. Natalie West, she was the one who told me we don't open accounts for that type of income. Karen stepped forward. Natalie isn't even here. You can't just... Zora tapped her phone. The room filled with a familiar voice. We don't open accounts for side hustles. Try a credit union. Gasps scattered like glass breaking. Celeste didn't smile. She didn't nod. She just said, quiet and direct. How long have we accepted being discredited before we speak? Zora's hand shook. I didn't post it. I thought no one would believe me. Celeste walked over. You were right to record. You were wrong to think you were alone. Zora's eyes filled. Celeste looked to the room. Let today be the last day that silence got more protection than truth. No one dared look away. Because for the first time, they realized they were all being watched not by cameras, but by conscience. Celeste stepped forward, not quickly, not slowly. Deliberately. Her heels made no sound against the marble, but the air shifted. Karen's arms were folded so tightly her knuckles whitened. Celeste faced the room, then turned toward the lounge staff. I'm not here for revenge, she said. I'm here for reckoning. Then, without a pause, Karen Elridge, branch manager, terminated immediately for racial profiling, abuse of process, and filing a false report against a controlling owner. Karen gasped. You can't. Celeste cut her off without even raising her voice. I already did. She turned slightly. Stephanie West dismissed for willful manipulation of compliance data, obstruction of service, and internal defamation. Stephanie looked like she'd been slapped. I was just following. Celeste raised one hand, not to silence, to end excuses. Your silence would have saved more than your defense, she said. Then to Craig. Craig Dalton, security lead relieved of duty for collusion in biased escalation tactics and for violating non-contact protocol against a verified client. Craig nodded once, not an agreement in acceptance. He stepped back from the group, eyes lowered. Celeste paused, looked toward the clients. Each of these individuals had a choice, not to be perfect but to be decent, and they failed. She turned toward Karen, one last time. You called security on me before you called me by name. Karen didn't speak. Because now, the room knew hers would never be called again. Celeste turned from the staff and faced the clients, the real audience. Her eyes locked on one man. Edward Langston. Still seated. Still smug. Still sipping from the ceramic cup he never paid enough attention to refill himself. You, Celeste said, voice crisp. Edward raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. You knocked my tablet off the table, called me sweetheart, said I didn't have posture. He shrugged. Wasn't personal? It never is until it is. She took a slow step forward. Edward Langston, you are permanently banned from all Monroe-affiliated institutions. Effective immediately. For harassment, racial targeting, and documented history of client misconduct. He laughed. Loud. Sharp. You can't be serious. I've brought this bank more business than half your board combined. Celeste tilted her head. And yet, somehow, you've brought less character than anyone in this room. Gasps. But no one moved to defend him. Maya whispered, finally. Edward stood, puffing out his chest. You think you can erase me? Celeste didn't blink. We don't build institutions for ego. We build them for dignity. The room stilled. Then someone clapped, quiet at first, then louder. A rhythm of release, of recognition. Celeste turned back to the staff. To anyone still standing in this room, know this silence is no longer safety, it's liability. Stephanie sat down. Karen lowered her eyes. And the room for the first time all morning began to breathe again. Celeste stepped to the center of the lounge, the same spot where she'd first been ignored. Now, All eyes followed her. She looked around, no longer at the staff. At the room itself. "I didn't come here today to fire people," she said. "I came here to start something." Someone shifted near the espresso machine, unsure if they were allowed to hope. Celeste raised the folder again, opened to a different document. "This branch starting today will serve as the pilot site for the Monroe Equity Standards." A few heads tilted. "A full reform program," she continued, "including 3 non-negotiables." She held up a hand, counting. 1 verbal audits, not just what's done but what's said, tone, language, silences. 2 bias tagging removal. Every client flagged based on appearance will be reviewed, corrected, and compensated if necessary. 3A dignity oath. Every staff member who stays and that's still in question will re-sign their contract with a new clause service without prejudice. Craig let out a breath, not protest release. Celeste scanned the room once more. "This is not a punishment model," she said. "This is a prevention model." She closed the folder. Termination was never the goal. A beat. Transformation is... And just like that, the silence changed again. Not the kind born of fear. The kind born of possibility. Because in that moment, even the marble beneath their feet seemed willing to be different. The lounge was no longer a waiting room. It was a witness stand, a confession hall, a blueprint. Celeste stood in the center, eyes steady, folder closed, voice level. "No new transactions will be processed here today." A pause. No protest. She continued, "Until we finish this transition, this branch will suspend all account actions. No withdrawals, no deposits, no client meetings." Someone in the back whispered, "Is this even allowed?" Celeste turned. Ownership allows many things. Accountability demands more. Then she gestured to a young woman who had been silently taking notes from the corner. "Lena Jacobs," Celeste announced. "Formerly junior teller. Effective immediately. Appointed interim branch director for audit and transition." Lena froze. "Me. You watched. You spoke. You stayed when it was harder to stay." Carla's voice came through Celeste's earpiece. "Confirmed all systems in Branch 07 are now under reform lock. External access frozen. Audit tools deployed." Celeste nodded, then looked to the room. "This is not a shutdown. It's a renovation. Of values." Malik raised a hand. "What happens after today?" Celeste didn't hesitate. "After today, this place no longer answers to tradition." She turned slowly. "It answers to truth, and the people brave enough to demand it." No one clapped. Not yet. Because for the first time, they were waiting to see what truth would look like when it finally got to lead. A shuffle near the back broke the stillness. It was Robert, the assistant manager. Still pale, still seated, but now, standing. "I need to say something," he said. All eyes turned. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lower his gaze. "I wasn't just complicit," he said. "I was part of it." Karen, still silent, finally looked up. Robert continued, "When the bias tag started, I didn't ask who made them. I just updated the system. I helped code it into client profiles, subtle enough not to get flagged, direct enough to get results." No one spoke. "I didn't think about the people, just the risk models, the efficiency scores. I told myself I was protecting the bank." Celeste studied him, not with anger, with precision. "Why now?" she asked. "Because watching you speak, I realized I've never respected the people I reported to," he said, "until today." He stepped forward, hands open. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for direction. I want to help tear down what I helped build." Celeste held his gaze. Then she nodded once. "You'll work under Lena," she said, "not above, not beside. You'll assist in compliance reform, quietly, thoroughly, without credit." Robert blinked, gladly. She added, "And every time you're tempted to justify the past, you'll remember this day." Robert nodded. And this time, no one whispered behind his back. Because sometimes, The first act of repair is learning to carry the weight without needing applause. Celeste took a final breath, eyes scanning the lounge, a place that had tried to define her in whispers. Now, every whisper had stopped. She looked at Zora. You came to open an account, and instead, you opened a door. Zora smiled, tears drying at the edge of strength. To the clients who stayed, Celeste continued, thank you for watching not from a distance, but from within. She turned to Robert, to Lena, to the officers who had not made arrests, but listened instead. This room began the day with marble and policy, she said. It ends the day with something more valuable, clarity. Then, finally, to the entire lounge. Justice doesn't begin with noise. It begins when someone dares to stay in the room even when that room doesn't believe they belong. No one clapped. Not because it wasn't powerful, but because it was sacred. Celeste picked up the black folder, now worn at the edges. She didn't wait for permission to exit. She didn't look back to check approval. As she stepped through the glass doors, one by one, the clients stood, not in tribute, but in understanding. Carla's voice came through the earpiece one last time. Reform activation complete. The branch is yours. Celeste didn't reply. She already knew. Because this time, the institution wouldn't carry her name at the top of the file. It would carry her fingerprint in every corner of its foundation. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.